Welcome back to page 121. Today we're going to take a look at a spell out of the player's handbook. One spell only. Permanency. Why just one spell? Well, you're going to see. Permanency is arguably one of the most important spells in the game. You can't make a magic item stay magic without a permanency, and there's a lot of other stuff you can do with the spell. So we're going to take a look at the spell. We're going to go in depth on how you can use it as your player character magic user, and why it's a great spell to have around. I also want to remind everyone I'm doing a push for subscribers for page 121. Over half my viewers come from people who don't subscribe. I'm trying to get up to that magical 1,000. As of the filming of this video, I'm just over 750. So if you could help me out and jump off the fence onto my side and subscribe, I would appreciate it. But today on page 121, Permanency. Permanency is an 8th level magic user spell found on page 91 of the original player's handbook. Basically, the casting time is 2 rounds. It's a permanent spell, and the spell affects the duration of certain other spells, making the duration permanent. The spells upon which personal permanency will be effective are, and they're listed here. I'm going to go into that list a little more completely out of Unearthed Arcana. And you can also permanency other items, other things like enlarge or invisibility, magic mouth, web, wall of force even. That's why it's kind of neat, because you can actually take that magical treasure chest and you don't want anybody else to find it, but you have no means to open it or get it out of the dungeon. You go ahead and you turn it invisible. Nobody will see it there, and you can hit it with a permanence and it just stays invisible. There's an argument to be made, by the way, that since the chest can never attack anything, the invisibility would be permanent anyway, but I've actually always let the invisibilities put on inanimate objects wear off after a day or so. That's just a house rule. So permanency also is used to lock the final enchantment into a newly created magic item. Somebody wants to create that +3 sword for the fighter henchman that they've had for years. They have to use an enchanted item, which is a 6th level spell. So they have to be 12th level for that. But they can't make that +3 sword until they're at least 16th level and able to cast a permanency. Now, in the write-up in the player's handbook, it says that when you cast permanency, you automatically lose 1 point of constitution forever. I always found that incredibly laughable, simply because no one would ever try to create anything other than mega level, ridiculous +5 weaponry. And since this book was written in 1978 and the Dungeon Master Guide was written in 1979, the Dungeon Master Guide contradicts that and says that you only have a 5% chance per permanency cast to lose a point of constitution automatically. We've actually used that version of it simply because it encourages you to go ahead and make that +2 dagger. Nobody would make lesser weapons if they knew they were going to lose a permanent point of constitution. The other thing is, sometimes I have just said, you know what, I'm not even going to bother with that, because that's a particularly harsh penalty in my opinion. Here we are on page 46 of the Dungeon Master Guide, where it talks about permanency. Only a 5% per spellcaster actually losing a point of constitution if the spell is cast upon a non-living thing. So if you cast it on himself, and I'm going to go into that in a moment, he has no chance of losing his constitution. If he's crafting a magic item, let's say +4 hammer, he then would cast the permanency, he would roll it, and 5% chance he would lose his point of constitution. Back in the old days, back in the 80s and 90s, I was pretty firm on that. It was a 5% chance if anybody bothered. Now, because we're all more mature players, and I realize how, let's be honest, antagonistic to the players a lot of the rules in the player's handbook and DMG really are, I've modified it a little bit, and as long as the player has done their diligence, they've paid the time and the money to create the item, they've told me their steps and everything else, as long as they're doing that, I'm really not going to punish them for creating a magic item by giving them 5% chance to lose a point of constitution. Now, for grins, we throw it, see if they would have lost it anyway. But 9 times out of 10 these days, I really don't count it. I don't want to punish my players for going out and creating a magic item that they really want, that can benefit their player, their character itself. I don't want to punish them for taking that kind of initiative, and that's really what this does. So absolutely, we use the DMG version of 5% chance only, as opposed to the player's handbook rather, of automatically losing it. That's pretty harsh. Now we're going to take a look at Unearthed Arcana, and we're going to look at the other aspect of permanency that I find really intriguing and useful. And I've actually known a lot of players over the years who've never bothered using it this way. And I was always a little surprised. I've encountered many players at various clubs or conventions or game stores where they've had high-level characters and they've never bothered using this aspect of this permanency spell. Basically, the spell permanency can be cast upon yourself and gives you comprehend languages, detect evil, detect illusion, detect invisibility, detect magic, infravision, protection from evil, protection from normal missiles, read magic, run, tongues, ultravision, and unseen servant. It's possible for you to just go ahead and cast your read magic on yourself and then follow it up with a permanency. You can now always read magic all the time. The permanency can be removed in an anti-magic field like a scroll of magic protection or something. But other than that, it's there. Somebody would have to actually dispel you, and then I would roll randomly as to whether it got that spell or a potion on you or a scroll or something. But the odds of you ever losing that are pretty small, and the expense of doing it is not that much. So my high-level magic users and the ones at my table, I've shown them this, and they've all said, oh, heck yes, I'm going to do this. And they write it on their sheet, and they must have it written on their sheet. And they must have it written under a column that says, permanency upon myself. And they can go from there. So it's an incredibly useful way to bolster your power in a non-combat type of way. None of these spells really enhance you in combat. Arguably, protection from normal missiles does. But let's face it, once you're up to 16th level, which is the minimum to cast this spell, you don't have to worry about normal missiles anymore anyway. But tongues is very useful. Protection from evil, always useful. So, and I allow the reverse of any of these to be done. Protection from good, or the reverse of tongues to make speaking confusing. If you really want to do that, I would allow it. Then you get to other spells, which are spells that you can put the permanency on of other spells that have been cast. You don't necessarily have to be the one who has cast this spell. Some of the, alarm, deep pockets, dispel magic, which is really interesting, enlarge, fear, force cage, gust of wind, invisibility, magic mouth, preserve, prismatic sphere, stinking cloud, wall of fire, wall of force, web, and wind wall. I've actually had very interesting encounters where a high-level magic user has gone ahead and cast a web and then just hit it with permanence, thus clogging up that room. If they're in a dungeon, he can cast it into a room. It clogs up that area of the room, and it hits it with a permanence. It's there for good. Wall of force, same thing. I have a wand of force, and I put up a wall of force out of the wand, and I can hit it with my own permanence, and I can go ahead and put that up. There's nothing here that says that I have to be the caster of the spell in order to cast permanency upon it. So there's a lot of useful things here for you to do with the permanency spell. Dispel magic, I'm not sure how I would let you permanency a dispel magic. Might be something where you could dispel magic. It'd have to be obviously on an area of effect something. So maybe you cast dispel magic on an area of effect on the floor, for instance, or on a doorway, and now you're going to hit it with permanency. So every time anything comes through that door, bam, they're hit with a permanency, dispel magic. They have a chance of losing some magic, some of the temporary magic on their bodies. Dispel magic only dispels spells cast on the body or non-permanent magic items such as scrolls, potions. I've even gone so far as to hit somebody and take, 1d10 charges off a wand with a dispel magic, just because the player character was affected by it. I made all the necessary rolls. He didn't have any scrolls, spells on him, or potions. So I said, well, okay, you got a wand. I'm going to throw a die 10. And the player thought that was fine. Again, I went after a temporary item. There's also an argument for dispel magic that it could temporarily suspend the power of your +3 sword or something like that. I've never dived too deep into that. I've never really encountered the situation. So these are really good ways to boost up your permanent power, your personal power, at 16th level and above. But they can also be kind of fun for the DM. Years and years ago, I was running a campaign, and the magic user in it, she was played by my wife, who the magic user was 18th level, and she had taken my advice, and she had gone ahead and permanency'd all these spells onto her. She was walking around, she had all these abilities and everything. They went into an encounter, and the encounter was with a beholder. The beholder, of course, has the anti-magic ray that he can use to bathe the subject and it suspends all magic. Well, my wife and one of the other party members were the ones that were caught in the anti-magic ray. The other players had already kind of gone around the other way around the beholder, were able to flank it. After a large pitched battle, they were able to destroy the beholder. The beholder's anti-magic ray came off of the two that he'd gotten. My wife was able to use her spells again. I don't allow anti-magic ray, by the way, to wipe spells from memory. Just suspends your ability to use them. But after the combat was over, I started chuckling a little bit, and my wife said, "Why are you laughing? What did you do?" And I told her all of these spells that had been permanenced on her were gone because they were all effectively dispelled. She had to then take the time and the expense to go ahead and put every one of these back on her player character. Having to finish the rest of the campaign, well, it was another the rest of that night and one other night where they didn't go back to anywhere to rest. She had to finish the rest of it without any of those abilities on her. She was very mad at me. Sorry, hun, but I kind of enjoyed the encounter. It was pure luck that she was the one that was affected by the anti-magic ray, but that's what happens. I don't do that often to my players, as you've heard me say in the past. If my players take initiative to do something like this that will beef up their characters, once in a blue moon, I'll pop them with something that might take it away for a while or make them recast it. But I don't routinely punish my players for doing things to out of the game to boost up their characters. So that's really about it. That's all I have to say. The only other thing I would say about permanency is if I had a character in my campaign, the player wanted desperately to have something like a +2 dagger of throwing. He wanted a set of those. I would allow him to enchant one with enchant an item and then do all the machinations to get it to +2 and then hit it with a permanency and then do the same with a duplicate. So he would now at the end of it have 2 permanency +2 daggers of throwing. I actually encourage that in my campaign. I like when my players say, my character's got some downtime. He's got some resources. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to expend him. And I'm going to craft this magic item and take me through the process. And I do. Sometimes it's a phone call. Sometimes I have him come early to the game. Arrive 15, 20 minutes early. We throw a few dice, make sure the magic item makes it. And then we go from there. So just a few ways permanency can be a great addition to your campaign. I've used it over the years and I love it and I recommend it highly. Just don't use it to punish your players. So that's all I've got to say today. I thank you for watching. I thank you for your time. Hope you enjoyed what you heard and saw. If you did, please like and subscribe. I'm doing that big push for subscriptions. I also have a Patreon going, so please remember that. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time on page 121.